The pursuit of money and material possessions has been a desire since time immemorial, but lately, the love for money for some people has become an all-consuming obsession. And maybe it can be connected to the fact that we now live in a global small world due to the internet. It is very easy to compare our lives with others and even become envious. When men become greedy, that selfish and excessive desire for more money than is needed pushes them to pursue money at any cost, even if it means compromising their own values and relationships. Unfortunately, when such vicious people make plans, it's only evil that you smell, and someone must catch the plague. This is the story of Susan Magara. Welcome back to Tavern Crime Chronicles. We explore strange, mysterious, chilling, and unsolved cases. If you have the nerve for fascinating stories, this is your channel. Today's story takes us to Hoima District, in the Midwestern region of Uganda. Situated about 200 kilometers from Kampala City, Hoima, now called the Oil City, is the apple pie that every investor is looking to bite as it houses numerous oil wells. With Uganda now venturing into oil drilling and refinery, Hoima has attracted investors, including the British, French, and Chinese. And with so much light shining at the end of the tunnel, all roads for job seekers, investors, and entrepreneurs are leading to Hoima as it is the new rich kid on the block. But where there is good, the evil reaper must come to harvest. And in this beautiful growing region of Bunyoro is the Magara family. Susan Magara was born on July 23, 1989, with a silver spoon in one of the wealthiest and most influential families in Bunyoro region. Despite her humble, reserved nature, Susan hails from a long line of prominent names. She was the daughter of John Fitzgerald Magara, a prominent businessman in Bunyoro sub-region, and Mary Maureen Kabayanja. Her mother died when she was still an infant and was raised in the care of her stepmother, Miss Immaculate Abuli Magara. John is the proprietor of Bunyoro Dairy Farm and Nayati Rice Mills, dealing in production of spirits, farm inputs, while supporting farmers to grow rice and maize that his company buys back at favorable market prices. Susan's grandparents include former First Deputy Prime Minister Henry Kajura, who also held various senior government posts. Kajura is now a senior presidential advisor on Bunyoro affairs and was bestowed the title of the crown wearer by the reigning Bunyoro King Solomon Gafabusa Eguru. This title is the highest recognition given by the kings of Bunyoro to award people who have outstandingly contributed towards the kingdom's development. Susan's great-grandparent, Loren Muganwa, participated in the fight for the return of the former lost counties of Bunyoro that had been given to Buganda by the British after the defeat of King Kabaliga of Bunyoro in 1899. Laurent, who was also a close confidant to the king, rose through the ranks to become the Chief Justice in Bunyoro Katara Kingdom. Now, so much can be said about this affluent family, but I hate to bore you with all the details. However, you will be glad to know that despite hailing from a wealthy and politically connected family, Susan lived a down-to-earth life, often socializing with people from all spheres of life. And on February 7, 2018, John Magara would receive a phone call that would shatter their family forever. So, sit down, relax, and probably grab a drink while I take you down this broken road. In late January 2018, a one Yakub Biensi alias Jacob organized and chaired a meeting at Yusufi Mosque in downtown Kampala. The meeting, consisting of 9 Muslim men, was called to lay strategies for raising funds to run the operations of the movement known as Madinat Tawheed wal Muhadiyin, MTM, which is loosely translated as the Holy Monotheistic City of Medina. MTM is known to be an offshoot of Allied Democratic Forces, a DF of which Yaqub is a former combatant. At this godforsaken meeting, The members made suggestions which included kidnap of children of wealthy businessmen. And to entice them, he said the funds would be used as capital to start businesses to create sustainable source of revenue so that their operations would be facilitated. Their target was to raise $1 million US. After intense suggestions and discussions, the members agreed to kidnap Susan, a cashier at Bwendero Dairy Farm, and the daughter of John Fitzgerald Magara, a wealthy businessman. The Magara family was well known to Yakub as he also hails from Bunyoro and had worked with them before. After tracking their target for days, Yakub's team kidnapped Susan near her residence along Kabaka Anjagala Road in Rubaga Division on February 7, 2018. On this fateful day, she was dragged into a waiting car which drove off to Kongnakawuka in Wakiso District, leaving her car abandoned at the gate. Yakub would later take her to a two-room rental house where she was guarded by a Hajara Nakandi, aged 35 years. It is here that Susan would unfortunately spend the next 20 traumatizing days as her captors negotiated for a ransom. Calls were made to Susan's parents demanding for a ransom of $1 million US, an equivalent of 3.7 billion Ugandan shillings, before they could release their daughter. Upon learning of his daughter's kidnap, Mr. Magara immediately traveled from Hoiama to Kampala to try negotiating her release. And as you can imagine, they desperately searched for the money from all their sources, and because the money being demanded was too much, their efforts were futile. Mr. Magara, while begging for his daughter's release, asked them to have mercy, for he had been able to raise 100 million shillings only, an equivalent of US $20,000. On several of those negotiations, the kidnappers refused the sum of money being offered, and even had Susan Magara personally talk to her mother through a phone call, pleading for her ransom money. As if this could not get any worse, to show their seriousness, one day Yakub went to the victim's location where she was being held together with one of his group members who had knowledge about torture and amputation. He had Susan's 2 fingers brutally cut off and were sent to her parents in an envelope. An anesthetic drug was injected near a cluster of nerves, numbing a larger area of the arm to allow the cutting off of 2 fingers from Magara's hand. One of the suspects who were later arrested by a joint force confessed, and although the case had been reported to police, they were unable to track the kidnappers because they used various SIM cards. A settlement was reached, with the family agreeing to pay US $200,000. The kidnappers instructed John Magara to drive his wife's car along Masaka Road to make the drop. The police were alerted to the instructions. When they reached MPG, the kidnapper told Magara to pick up a phone from the Welcome to MPG signpost, where further instructions would be given. However, the police intervened and the mission was called off. On February 17, 2018, the kidnapper made another call, instructing John Magara to take Bombo Road up to Matuga, where he would receive further directions on where to drop the ransom. As he was being given instructions to retrieve another phone from a school signpost, the police officer in the back seat of his car intervened, leading to the mission's cancellation. 2 days later, around 3 p.m., the kidnapper contacted John Magara and directed him to go to Haas Petro Station in Namasuba along Entebbe Road to retrieve a message or package from their daughter, Susan Magara. The kidnapper instructed John Magara's sister, Flora Magara, to drop the money in Busabala. The family this time chose not to involve the police, thinking it would solve the issue. They successfully delivered US $200,000 as instructed. John Magara waited in anticipation of Susan's return, but his hopes were shattered. On February 28, 2018, he received a call from President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, instructing him to go and identify a body with 2 missing fingers. He went to the scene in Kigo, along the Entebbe Express Highway, and lying lifeless in the bushes was his daughter's lifeless body. A chilling wind went through the whole nation, and fear gripped everyone who had been following the televised search for Susan Magara. How heartless could someone be that even after the ransom money was painfully delivered, their daughter's life was still taken? Fear gripped the nation, for you didn't know who was next, and as people held their families closer, the police even intensified their search with all the intelligence they could manage. Now, 2 days before Susan's body was recovered, something unusual happened at Hajara's residence, where their victim was being kept. Hajara received surprise guests who spent hours at her residence. Little did they know that Susan, the kidnapped lady they had been watching on television, was in one of the rooms. Unfortunately for Susan, one of the visitors mentioned Hajara's name, and it's at this point that all hell broke loose. Because they had always used pseudo-names, and for the most part, Susan was blindfolded to avoid being identified after her release. Hajara became impatient and restless, fearing that Susan would positively identify her. On informing Yaqub, the movement leader, another meeting was held at Yusafi for a way forward to release or kill her. Unfortunately for her, these heartless, greedy, and selfish men could not risk being discovered. Her fate was sealed. On February 27, Magara's killers tied her arms behind her back. Her mouth and nose were wrapped with sellotape. As she struggled to breathe, a lethal injection was administered, ending the 28-year-old's precious life. The kidnappers, meanwhile, started the processes of enriching themselves so that they could multiply the money as earlier discussed, or so they thought. They bought taxi minibuses for transport business, and even bought pieces of land in Mukono district, near Lake Victoria, where a mosque would be erected. Prior to this, police had received numerous tips about a one Patrick Agaba alias Pato who had traveled out of the country to South Africa with a big bag of cash in US dollars. And because Patrick was a distant relative to Susan, very well known to the Magara family, he became a big suspect because he was known for living large, and yet his money sources were not known. His story is for another day, but this coincided with the time the ransom money was dropped and Patrick was tracked down while partying and lavishing in South Africa. However, he would later be released for lack of evidence. One fateful day, the police, while making their investigations, tracked one SIM card which had earlier been used by the kidnappers to an elderly woman. She informed them that it belonged to her son, who would immediately be tracked down and arrested while hiding at a mosque in downtown Kampala. This man would later lead them to the rest of the group. These 9 horrid people remain on trial, and their sentence is yet to be decided as the case is still in court. And as Susan's family painfully come to court to testify and even listen to these heartless men confess, we condole with them every other day, for no parent should bury their child, let alone go through what they endured. Susan Magara was a kind-hearted, down-to-earth girl whose life was taken viciously at the prime of her youth. And as the courts deliberate a deserving punishment for her murderers, only we can pray that Susan's family finds solace in knowing that their daughter's murderers will never find peace, for no amount of prison sentence is enough justice. And folks, that was it for today. Tell me, what do you think about this chilling case? As usual, share your thoughts in the comments section down below. And if this is your daily dose of content, remember to like this video, share, and subscribe if you haven't. See you next time.